Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is threatening to fine cities and counties for up to $5,000 if they move forward with a vaccine requirement on their employees.
If a government agency in the state of Florida forces a vaccine as a condition to employment, that violates Florida law, and you will face a $5,000 fine for every single violation.
This comes after President Biden ordered new federal vaccine requirements for private sector employees, as well as health care workers and federal contractors, in an amped up effort to curb the spread of the COVID-19 Delta variant. So Joe Biden's got to be careful here, because he's going to make a folk hero out of Ron DeSantis on the right. I have to say, and I've said this before on this program, but I do think that, Biden's speech, where he overtly blamed 80 million people for death of other people, for suffering, while sanctifying the vaccinated and then being like, but we're all in this together. This DeSantis move was foreseen. As soon as those words came out of his mouth, this is kind of what we knew was coming, right? Yeah. And I think you're going to see it from more than just Ron DeSantis, quite frankly.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Go ahead, Ryan.
So it felt deliberate. The way that Biden, Biden could have framed the messaging around the mandate plus the testing,
right,
much differently. And he chose to be aggressive about it. And I think there are a couple of upsides to that from the Democratic perspective. One is that it gets the message out there faster. They think that if it gets struck down in court, if they can get 30, 40 million people vaccinated before it gets struck down, plus you add on top of that all of the constant infections, you're getting higher and higher and higher and getting closer to serious levels of immunity. But also it isolates people like DeSantis, and it elevates them. And Democrats love this Pied Piper strategy. They tried it with Trump in 2016. It led to him getting elected president. But they like kind of isolating the extreme wing of the Republican Party, and they think that then benefits them among suburban voters. And they may or may not be right about that in the short term, medium term, long term. I don't know. The conversation though keeps losing the testing option, and I think and that was partly that's a media failure, and partly Biden just didn't really emphasize the testing option.
Well, because I don't think for federal employees they had that option. I thought that was only for the businesses that had over 100.
That's the newer mandate, right?
Well, I guess my question about because I think you're right. The order has both, but my question about the testing option is who's paying for it, and do you still get the time off, right? Because under the order, the vaccine, obviously the government pays for the employer to provide it, and then you get paid time off to get the vaccine, and also I assume to recover if you have side effects or whatever. Do you still get that same benefit for the testing, or is it just sort of another way to push you toward the vaccine? Because again, unless they're actually treated exactly the same, to me, it's not actually a choice.
Right, and it should be free and it should be accessible at the workplace, provided, that's how it ought to be. Because if you're insisting that somebody do it, you can't, take half their paycheck just to have them, because in some areas these tests are extremely expensive
and hard to find,
and hard to find and slow. And it's a pitiful state of affairs that we're this deep into a pandemic and testing isn't just free and readily available to everybody.
Yeah.
But I think that's the burden is on the company. And so that's why we're seeing more and more companies issuing the mandate, is because, and I've seen this even in my own life with the businesses sending out the memo saying, okay, you have to get vaccinated. We're not going to be offering testing because that is an expense on them. And so it is just forcing people. And that is, and you say, Ryan, that DeSantis seems to be the extreme wing, but I don't think he's actually the extreme wing. I don't think he's viewed by a lot of people, and even people like myself who are not Republican. I don't view DeSantis as extreme. I view him as more freedom and almost sane in a lot of ways. I know I'm going to get a lot of crap for that.
A lot of Democrats, I think of him as somebody that if they elevate it could help them in the suburbs. But he came under fire from that press conference for not correcting misinformation. Let's take a look at that.
The vaccine changes your RNA So for me, that's a problem. So I'm here with you folks. We don't want to have the vaccine. It's about our freedom and liberty. It's not about the vaccine.
And you can kind of see him kind of shifting on his feet over there, like, ugh, I'm going to get nailed for this one. And then the guy says, we don't want this vaccine. And DeSantis is like, oh, that's not exactly the messaging. Because he's trying to walk this very fine line where he's trying to be anti-vax without being anti-vax.
I don't think he's
trying to give people choices.
Exactly.
Choices.
That's why he doesn't like the messaging from that guy who says this changes your RNA and we don't want the vaccine.
Yeah.
So he's like, this is not. This is not the messaging.
It did remind me a little bit of a couple of the Trump press conferences where you saw Fauci be like, like as Trump was saying stuff.
Yes, that was his Fauci move.
That was a lot of Fauci energy from DeSantis just then.
So a spokesperson for DeSantis, in fact, had this to say in response to scrutiny, quote, "The governor has never said the vaccine changes your RNA, and nobody who has seen his 50-plus public appearances promoting vaccination throughout Florida this year would think that is the governor's position." The speaker, whose remarks included that comment, was at the press conference in his capacity as a member of a lawsuit against the city government's extreme overreach, unquote. But this kind of goes into what I was saying about the Democratic strategy. The Democrats, and I think recklessly in some ways, like to elevate nuts like that, who are going to then spread misinformation that the media then calls misinformation and then further marginalizes and isolates Republicans on this question. That might be good politics for them in the midterms, but then they're elevating misinformation. So they're contributing to the problem that they are saying that they're trying to rebut.
Yeah, I think people have been largely unfair to DeSantis. I mean, you can disagree with his approach. Obviously, many people do. But I think, saying he's the one out there pushing that messaging, I mean, he physically cringes when the guy says it. Obviously got caught flat-footed by that. Obviously, we know what he said is not correct. But I think more than that, even on the vaccine push, DeSantis is one of the first governors out there on TV with World War II veterans sitting with them as they got their vaccines. I mean, he has a huge elderly population. He knows that they, of all populations, need the vaccine the most. And I think, generally speaking, Florida, I don't think it leads the country in vaccination rates, but it's definitely not at the bottom. It's pretty much, I think, in the middle of the pack, top 20 or something like that.
Yeah. And we have new Hill-Harris-X data gauging voters' views on Biden's federal vaccine mandate. Let's take a look.
The poll found 54% approve of Biden's vaccine mandates, 32% do not, 14% are unsure, 79% of Democrats approve of Biden's mandates, along with 56% of independents, while 59% of Republicans disapprove. A new Axios Ipsos poll found similar findings. Overall, 60% of Americans support the federal government implementing vaccine mandates. More than 8 in 10 Democrats support the new requirements, and so do around 60% of independents. Roughly 30% of Republicans back these requirements. So, I think this might change. I think this might change as time goes on. And, if we start to see, once again, people get the vaccine, and we kind of see what's happening in the colleges where they're heavily, heavily vaccinated, around 95, 98%, and then they're still reeled into masking, social distancing, locking down. If the pandemic doesn't actually end, I kind of wonder if this is going to backfire big time on Democrats.
Well, but that's why I think the messaging from the White House was so destructive, because people are going to get frustrated. People did the thing they were asked to do. They expect a reward. But yet, instead of actually just giving them that reward, they're like, no, blame the other guy. Your neighbor is responsible for this. And I think that's where it gets really destructive. But for me, this polling is kind of interesting because it sort of seems a little bit to me, and I'm interested both of you what you think about this, but it seems a little bit like the gun control debate to me, where it's like really concentrated interest but like diffuse popularity. Because if you look at some of the polling or interest around the gun control debate, it's like, do you support taking other people's guns away? Well, yeah, sure. Do you support the government taking your guns away? No, out of my cold dead hands. You can pry, and that distinction is really hard to pull. And I'm wondering if that dynamic's at play here, where it's like, do you support other people getting vaccinated? Yes, I do. Can we jab your 5-year-old? Well, I don't know about that, right?
Oh,
so,
right. When it comes to kids under 12, it's going to be a huge mess.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That'll be a shift.
Like if we think this debate is tense, wait until that one comes around, because then it's not the person's choice. It's a parent making a choice for kid. That's going to be a mess. But the gun control analogy is interesting. Maybe the kind of gun debate, the contemporary gun debate, is a useful analogy, because it used to be the case that there weren't a whole lot of liberals who actually voted on the issue of gun control or gun safety. That changed kind of post Parkland or post Sandy Hook. And so then you had intensity on both sides. And I think in this debate, you do have intensity on both sides. You do have a lot of liberal Democrats who really strongly support these mandates in this kind of the same intensity with which you have people who strongly oppose them. I don't know. What do you think, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's interestingly, I actually, this is totally anecdotal, but I would say in my life, I think there's even a lot of Republicans who actually support the mandates as well. They're really interested in getting their lives back. They want the pandemic to end. I think all of us feel that way together, right? We just want this thing to be over with. And so a lot of people feel like, well, okay, if we all just get this, then we can finally end this. We can get back to normal. And so what are you holding out for? But again, if we end up like Israel, where they say, okay, you're not fully vaccinated until you have 3 shots now, and that is what counts as fully vaccinated. And then they're now saying, and probably a 4th coming up soon. And if it's just endless, like 2 isn't enough, and now you need 3, and now you need 4, and you still have to wear a mask, and you still have to social distance, and we're still going to lock you out of schools, which is what college students are dealing with. I just don't know how this plays out. I think that's when people are going to, on both sides, say, wow, this is just too much. And to your point, Ryan, when you bring kids into it, I don't know. That's going to be a rough one.
15 jabs to slow the spread. That's what we're doing.
And 3 masks, and wear eye goggles, too, while you're at it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the virus has a say in all of this, too, which
it's a very smart
kind of wish they didn't. But thank you for watching What America's Thinking. We will see you next time.